All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive, and we're going to be looking at literal thinkers.
Literal thinker.
Have you ever met one?
Oh, yeah. I know a few.
They're interesting people, right?
Fascinating, yeah.
I think so, too. And we found this really great article on WikiHow.
Okay.
It's called How to Get Along with Literal Thinkers. And I think it's really interesting because it gives all these practical tips.
Nice.
So I figured we could dive into it and
yeah, let's do it.
See what we can learn.
Sounds good.
So what is literal thinking? I guess we should start there.
Yeah, so literal thinking is basically when someone focuses on the literal meaning of words.
Okay.
So they might not always understand things like metaphors.
Yeah, no kidding.
Or sarcasm or humor.
Right, like that example they gave in the article, feeling under the weather.
Yes, exactly.
Like someone's literally standing under a rain cloud.
They're picturing that in their mind.
Yeah, I mean, but really, though, what happens when a literal thinker comes up against this figurative language all the time?
Right.
Does it, like, cause constant frustration, or do they sort of learn to adapt?
You know, I think it really depends.
Okay.
Some literal thinkers, they develop, like, coping mechanisms.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they learn to recognize, like, common idioms and stuff.
Oh, okay.
But for others, it can be, it can be pretty frustrating.
Especially in social situations, I would think.
Yeah, exactly, where it's, like, really important to pick up on those subtle cues.
Right.
But the article really stresses that it's not about, like, being difficult.
Okay.
It's just how their brains work.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's because of conditions like autism, but sometimes it's just, natural.
Yeah, so, like, some people are visual learners, some people are auditory learners.
Exactly. It's all part of the spectrum, right?
It's all part of the spectrum, exactly.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting is that the article doesn't just focus on, like, potential downsides.
Right.
They actually highlight the strengths
Yeah, they do.
of this thinking style.
Absolutely.
Which I think is cool.
And I think that's really important because, literal thinkers often excel at things that require a lot of precision.
Okay. Like what?
Like following rules, procedures.
Uh-huh.
They're great at, like, tasks that require a very strict interpretation with instructions.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and think about, like, the legal system.
Oh.
Contracts, laws. They're all based on literal interpretations of language.
Right.
Imagine if everyone started interpreting the law metaphorically.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would be chaos.
It would be a mess.
Total chaos.
Yeah.
I bet they're good at things like computer programming.
Oh, absolutely.
Where it's all about accuracy and detail.
Yeah, their brains are, like, wired for that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's amazing.
That is pretty cool. So they really thrive in those environments where it's all about clarity and consistency.
Yeah, and I think, that's why it's so important to understand these strengths.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, like, avoiding miscommunication.
Right.
It's about really appreciating the unique value they bring to the table.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm ready for the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
Let's get into the tips. Because
Let's
I have a feeling, like, knowing when to use that really clear, direct language versus, like, all the fun thinkers of speech we throw around
Right.
could be a game changer in so many interactions, not just with literal thinkers,
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's about, like, making our communication style more inclusive and effective.
Yeah.
So are you ready to ditch those metaphorical life jackets and jump in?
I am.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, so we know literal thinkers have a lot of strength, especially in areas where you need to be really precise.
Definitely.
But let's face it, in everyday conversations, all those metaphors and idioms we use, they can really trip things up.
They can.
The article even talks about, like, being careful with teasing.
Oh, yeah.
Which I feel like with someone who takes things literally, that could be a minefield.
It definitely could, because teasing relies on that shared understanding that you're not being serious.
Okay.
And a literal thinker might miss that.
Totally.
Okay, so say I'm working on
a project with someone, and I know they're a literal thinker.
Okay.
And they're just not getting this concept I'm trying to explain. And I'm like, come on, it's not rocket science.
Oh, no.
How's that going to go over?
Probably not very well.
Yeah.
They might actually start thinking about rocket science.
Right.
And how complicated it is.
And then we're totally off track. So instead of saying something like that,
right.
What should I say?
Just be direct and specific. Like, hey, I'm having trouble explaining this part. Can we maybe approach it from a different angle?
So it's like taking all that fluffy metaphorical language and just making it like crystal clear instructions.
Yeah, exactly.
No more beating around the bush.
No beating around the bush.
The article also mentions I statements.
Oh, yes. Those are great.
So instead of saying, like, you're always late,
right,
you would say, I get worried when you're late because it makes me think something might have happened or whatever.
Exactly. Because that shifts the focus from blame to your own feelings and experience.
But it makes it less confrontational.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easier for them to process.
Exactly. Remember, it's not about them being difficult.
Right.
It's just about how they process information.
That makes sense. It's
Yeah.
like almost like we're learning a new language
Kind of, yeah.
where clarity reigns supreme.
Clarity is key.
And actually, speaking of languages, the article mentions using visual aids.
Oh, yes.
I thought that was interesting.
That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Because think about it. A lot of literal thinkers, they translate words into visual images in their minds.
Oh, okay.
If you're trying to explain something complicated, like a diagram or a chart,
Yeah.
or even a simple drawing, can make a huge difference.
It's like giving them a tangible representation
Yes, exactly.
of whatever that concept is.
Exactly.
So instead of saying, like, we need to streamline this process, you could literally draw a chart that
Exactly.
shows how things could be more efficient.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
taps into their strength of understanding, that concrete visual information.
Right.
But even with all these strategies,
Yeah.
misunderstandings are still going to happen sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
It's just part of being human.
Right.
So it's all about how we handle those moments.
Okay, so let's say I ask a coworker, who I know is a literal thinker,
Okay.
to, like, keep me in the loop on a project.
Okay.
And later I find out they haven't given me any updates.
Uh-oh.
Do I just, like, jump to conclusions? Or
No, Will.
is there a better way to approach that?
I mean, jumping to conclusions is rarely helpful in any situation.
True.
It's better to just approach the situation with, like, curiosity
Okay.
and a willingness to understand.
Okay.
So maybe they took keep me in the loop,
Oh.
literally.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
thought you just wanted to know when the project was finished.
Right.
So just clarify, like, hey, when I said keep me in the loop, I was hoping for regular updates. Can we talk about how to make sure we're both on the same page?
It's like that reminder we talked about before, right?
Yeah,
Communicate with people the way they would like to be communicated with.
exactly.
Yeah.
Just be direct, clear, no room for misinterpretation.
And even if it feels like we're putting in more effort,
Yeah.
clear communication,
It benefits everyone.
it does.
It builds trust. It prevents misunderstandings.
Right.
It just makes for smoother, more productive interactions.
Right.
And the article also reminds us to, if we see someone else struggling to communicate with a literal thinker,
Yeah.
we can step in and help.
Oh, interesting.
It's about being an ally, creating a more inclusive environment.
That's really cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So it's about recognizing that communication is a two-way street.
Exactly.
Sometimes we have to adjust our
Yeah.
approach to make sure that everyone feels heard and understood.
Exactly.
So this is bigger than just like tips for talking to one specific type of person.
It is.
It's about becoming better communicators, period.
Absolutely.
It's funny, as we've been talking about this, I've realized I use so many metaphors and idioms without even thinking about it.
Oh, yeah, me too. It's like they're just built into how we talk.
Like second nature.
Exactly. But as we've been saying, that can make things tricky when you're talking to someone who takes things literally.
Right.
But I wonder, do you think there are ever times when using metaphors or idioms with a literal thinker could actually be helpful?
That's a good question.
Like,
Maybe if you were trying to like teach them about those figures of speech,
yeah,
like use that under the weather example
Mhm.
to show that it doesn't actually mean what the words say.
right. Like you're giving them the key to unlock the secret code.
Exactly. But even then, you'd have to be super clear that you're not being literal, right?
Absolutely. Otherwise, it just creates more confusion.
For sure. Okay, so the article talks about stepping in. If you see someone struggling to communicate with a literal thinker,
Yes.
what does that actually look like?
Well, it could be something small, like you notice someone's using a lot of idioms or sarcasm,
Okay.
and you gently suggest they try being more direct.
Okay.
Or maybe you see a literal thinker getting confused or frustrated,
Right.
and you could jump in and try to explain what the other person means.
So like a communication translator.
Exactly.
Helping bridge the gap between those different ways of understanding.
I like that.
This whole deep dive has really made me think about my own communication habits.
Me too.
It's not just about learning how to talk to literal thinkers.
Right.
It's about becoming more aware of how we're communicating in general.
Absolutely. And recognizing that there's no one right way to communicate.
Right.
It's all about adapting to the situation and the person you're talking to.
So what's the one big thing you hope people take away from this deep dive?
Well, I think it's that if we understand and appreciate different thinking styles,
Uh-huh.
it can really help us all communicate better.
Okay.
It's about embracing diversity, not just in what we say,
Yeah.
but in how we think.
That's a great takeaway. I love that.
Yeah.
It's about making sure everyone feels heard and understood and valued,
Exactly.
no matter how their brain works.
Exactly.
This has been such an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it really is.
I feel like I've learned a lot
Me too.
about communication in general.
I think at the end of the day,
Yeah.
when we can communicate clearly and effectively,
Uh-huh.
it makes everything better.
Right.
It helps us build stronger relationships.
Yes.
It helps us work together better.
Absolutely.
It just helps us navigate the world a little more smoothly.
Well said. So to everyone listening, I hope you'll try to embrace all those different ways of thinking out there.
Me too.
And next time you meet someone who takes your words literally,
Uh-huh.
don't let it frustrate you.
Yeah.
See it as a chance to connect with someone who sees the world a little differently.
And maybe learn something new about yourself along the way.
I like that. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into the world of literal thinkers.
It really has.
We'll see you next time for another one.
See you then. 谢谢